we connected, Craig and I, probably, it's going to maybe about 5 years ago or something, Craig. And what we would do is we would go for long walks outside with Craig's dog and talk about business, mindfulness, well-being, nature, and all sorts of good things. And over the course of time of getting to know Craig, what I really appreciated was his depth and knowledge and practice in mindfulness. I think with anything, you know, and you can link this to mindfulness in business, you can link it to sustainability. The minute it becomes a commercial opportunity, you get a lot of people who are jumping on the bandwagon, have maybe done a week's training in sustainability, a week's training in mindfulness, and then they come in and they're like, hey, I know how to do stuff. And Craig has been doing this for decades. And the lived experience that Craig can share, both as a practitioner and somebody who works with other people, is just phenomenal. So with that said, Craig, that's my introduction. It's now over to you.
Thank you. And formal ones are always better, aren't they? So I don't want to make this presentation heavy. I'm going to share a couple of slides, but I really want to give you a taster of what mindfulness is. I want to create discussion about, you know, how you can use mindfulness and this journey to net zero, or, you know, to create more resilience, to help work with others, whatever you're kind of coming to this session for. Be good to discuss that, because mindfulness is one of these things where, gosh, I suppose I mean, I filter it into, I would say, everything I do is, you know, professionally, try and do it personally, although I do fall off the wagon at times. You know, it's times that we're not mindful and we lose our awareness and we lose our ability to be present, of course, but it is a seed of kind of whatever I do. And I work in a lot of different kind of areas of well-being as far as work is concerned, but I see mindfulness at the hub of all of it. So hopefully once I kind of go into a bit more depth into explaining what mindfulness is, we'll be able to start to see that, how mindfulness can really help be applied to whatever we are taking forward, or whatever our kind of journey here is as well. So it would be good to discuss that. And I'm going to give you a particular practice which is really good to use in nature as well. So I'll go over that at the end. One, to help you just become more sensory aware. We will try the practice sitting where we are, but again, hopefully it'll give you an idea of how to use this on a walk, for instance. So mindfulness doesn't have to be all formal, sitting down, cross-legged, eyes closed, and, you know, kind of being still. We can integrate mindfulness into our day and into our activities as well. I'm just going to share my screen here, and we will get some slides up. But of course, if you have any questions as we're going here, just fire them out. Everyone see that? Okay. Yeah. Let's get into full screen. So mindfulness and nature, they go hand in hand, really. I see. So some of my favorite practices involve nature. It's a vital part for me, and it's a big part of how I will practice now. This ability to just immerse myself into nature. I feel there's nothing that takes me into a state of being more mindful and present quicker than getting into nature. So hopefully we'll connect the dots there, and really get this link between mindfulness and nature, and also how it makes us more conscious and aware. First, what I'd like to do is guide you through a little practice, invite you to take part, or you can just observe, whatever feels comfortable for you. And what we're going to work with is kind of like this phase one of mindfulness, and that's just the ability to regulate our breathing and connect to our breathing. Now, why do we do that? Well, the breath is here and it's present. So that is a lot of what we're working with in mindfulness, focusing our mind on what's present rather than getting caught up in thinking about all the things we've got to do later or stories of the past. So we choose something to anchor our mind into, be it breath, body sensations, sound, sensory awareness. All these things can help us with that. There's also a lot going on neurologically and within the physiology of the body as well when we can start to control our breathing. One of the first things it does when we start to regulate and control our breathing, it winds down the nervous system, this fight, flight, freeze response that we're constantly in or constantly reacting to, this heightened stress response. Now, that's not always negative when we're in a stress response, but a lot of times it is being triggered with involuntary and at times when we don't want it to, especially when we are sitting worrying about things, or as we touched on before this session started, was when you are trying to do good and you're trying to push things forward and you are maybe a bit of an activist for things like climate change and stuff as well. When things get shut down and there's barriers in your way, this can also create stress responses. So we constantly have this stress response going on within us. Now, when we start to regulate and control our breathing, what that does is it pulls this nervous system down and brings in more of our kind of recovery state nervous system. So it brings sympathetic nervous system down, takes us into parasympathetic, which is our rest and recovery system. And just a few minutes of regulated breathing can help us do that. And that is probably the most important thing. It takes us into this state of being calm, being relaxed. Oxytocin starts to come into the body. The amygdala part of the brain, which is all responsible for fight, flight, freeze reaction, blood starts to move away from there into other parts of the brain. So we're not just thinking about, danger and defending ourselves and all of these kind of things. We're actually able to open up a little bit more into the world. So there's quite a lot going on when we start to regulate our breathing. And again, it's something we can use on the spot when we feel that things are just heightening up a little bit, stress is building, we feel tension in the body, or we feel we're getting annoyed about something, or we're worrying about something, or overthinking it. We can just come back to regulating our breathing and wind that all down. And again, I'll explain a little bit later about how that really helps us become more mindful as well. So for this practice, we're just going to take our seat. Feel free to switch your camera off if you want, if you're not want to be seen. But we'll just sit in our seats as we are and just sit with decent posture. So we have this sense of the back being quite strong, lengthened, chest, tummy, and rib cage just gently opening as well. And then just allowing the body to soften, allow the chin to tuck slightly, and either just soften the gaze or close the eyes. The key thing is that we're comfortable, first of all. And then from there, just paying attention to the sounds you can hear around you. Paying attention to the atmosphere in the room, so the feeling of the air on the skin, the light in the room, space in the room. And then notice what the mind is doing. Maybe your mind's overanalyzing things or getting caught up in a little bit of chatter. And that's okay. It's what the mind does. I'm not trying to empty that. And now if you can, just see if we can start to put our focus on the breath. The mind may chatter away a little bit in the background, but let's put our focus on the breath. and notice how fast or how slow you're breathing. Notice how shallow or how deep you're breathing. Noticing where you feel the breath in the body. So just fully observing the breath, the depth of the breath, tempo of the breath, where you feel the breath. And then again, just checking in where the mind has maybe wandered off to. You start chattering away to yourself, overthinking what's going on with the breath, judging, analysing. Again, that's all okay. It's what the mind does. And if we can, let's bring our focus again fully back to the breath. And if you feel comfortable doing so, just taking a slightly deeper breath in without forcing it though. So it should still be quite an easy, even breath in as we just lengthen the breath in. And then easy, even breath back out. And we're just trying to get this even breath in, even breath out. So we're regulating the breath in and the breath out. Can sometimes help to count the breath as it comes in for 2, 3, 4, whatever works for you. And then count an even breath back out again. Or if you don't want to count the breath, you can just say a little phrase in your mind like, I am breathing in. I am breathing out. I am breathing in. I am breathing out. And I'll just leave you for a moment. Stay with that focus of the breath. So you're either counting the breath or saying the phrase of I am breathing in, I am breathing out. And that's the focus for your mind. And if you notice it wanders off and gets caught up in thinking about something, bring it back to either the counting or the phrase. Mind gently drifts off, gets caught up in thinking. We recognize that. We bring the attention back to the breath. Regulating the breath in, the breath out. Giving the mind something to focus on. And now if you feel comfortable doing so, just continuing with the breath in that we're taking, so a nice, easy, even, controlled breath in. And if possible, just lengthening the breath out. So you're taking slightly longer, full breath out. Just completely releasing the breath out. Can also help to Make the breath out quite vocal so you can really release the breath out. Even breath in. Full breath out. And just notice what happens to the body as you fully breathe out. Notice how the body can soften, release, let go of the breath. Just like the body can soften, release, let go of the breath, the mind can soften, release, and let go of thinking. Drop its attention into the body. And then we'll just bring that awareness again, just into the body, just noticing the general sensations in the body after a few minutes of breathing. Noticing if there's any areas of the body that feel quite spacious or light. Manage to soften at all. Bringing awareness to the space around the body, the air touching the skin. That feeling of air just around the body and touching the body. Opening up to the space in the room. Expanding that awareness to all the space outside. And when you're ready, you can just gently open your eyes and bring a little bit of movement in the body. Maybe stretch the neck, roll the shoulders. Feel free to have a stretch or grab a drink. So at this point, I'd welcome any feedback as to what did you notice doing that practice. There's no right or wrong. And it's not about saying, it was good, I really liked it, or that worked for me. You know, maybe you found it difficult, maybe you found my voice annoying, maybe, you know, whatever it was, it doesn't matter. It's just about noticing what happened throughout that practice. Yeah,
I was going to say, it always takes me a little bit to get into the breathing when I do it, but every time I do, I notice the sort of, just my shoulders, even if they are relaxed, after a bit of breathing, they get like even more relaxed. Like they sort of melt away into just becoming very loose, and it just feels better.
Yeah, good. So you just kind of really feel the body softening with a bit of breath work. And then do you notice that does the mind settle down at all?
Yeah, definitely. And to start with, it'll jump about on things, or like I notice my legs are shaking, so I just remind myself to just be still and just really focus in on the breath coming in, and I visualize the breath coming up my nose. It comes around my head and then it comes out through my mouth. That's why I imagine it doing it, and I just focus on that image until I like relax into it.
Good, nice. Thanks, Stuart. Jimmy, did you have something to say as well there?
Particularly in the second half, you know, when you were talking, it brought back a memory of a breathing process called Buteyko. Don't know if you ever heard of it.
Good, called what? Sorry.
Buteyko.
Buteyko.
Buteyko. No,
No.
Buteyko.
No, I've not come across that.
It was a professor in Australia. Anyway, it was a clinical nurse in Glasgow used it with children who suffer from asthma, and it was controlling the gaps in the breathing rather than, you know, to try and count the breathing out, when you were saying lengthen the breathing out, so that there was the CO2, the O2 stayed in your body a wee bit longer.
Yeah, yeah.
And I found, particularly when you mentioned that, I found that I've used it before when I'm sitting in doctor's surgery just to lower my blood pressure.
Yes.
And lower my pulse rate.
Yes.
I find that.
Sorry, carry on.
Well, really, that was all I was going to say.
Yeah. Well, that's it's interesting. That's a very good instinctive thing to do. Say in a situation like that, to lower heart rate, to lower blood pressure. So what happens when we take a long breath out? That's sending signals to the nervous system, that fight, flight, freeze system, it's okay to relax. Because if we were in a stress state, we would be taking short, gasping breaths. If there was real danger in front of us, what this nervous system was designed for, we would be taking short, gasping breaths. The heart rate would go up, the blood pressure would go up. Now, the interesting thing about this whole system, it doesn't just respond to real physical threats or danger, it also responds to what's going on in our mind. So if we're worrying about something, if we've got an appointment coming up, we're in a doctor's surgery and we're kind of a bit apprehensive or anxious about it, just the thought of that alone will give us this physical response of heart rate up, blood pressure up, a stress response. Now, when we take this long breath out, especially if it's a bit more vocal, again, if we were in a real stress state or under real physical danger, we wouldn't be taking that big long sighing breath out. So it winds that nervous system down, kicks in this other nervous system, the parasympathetic I was talking about. So that's the key thing about that long breath out. It helps relax the nervous system. It helps, take us out of this state of being stressed, basically, within the body. And, starts to regulate everything. The vagus nerve kicks in, which starts to regulate our organs. Heart rate comes down, blood pressure comes down, etc. Thanks, Jimmy. Anyone else got any comments or questions?
Yeah, it's me, Craig. What I found really interesting about that is I sit and the mind goes quiet and I have a second of silence. And then the mind goes, oh, well done, you've done a good job there. And it's almost like the mind wants to kick in and start congratulating itself, because it's like, you're following the instructions, you're getting in. And I noticed that, I think it's the same as what Stuart had said, you kind of ground, you come down, and then I yawn. I want to move my body instinctively because all of a sudden I'm aware of all this stress and this tension that's going on. And just to build upon the rest of the comments that you'd said, to kind of link this back into even business or climate change, it's like if we're worrying about stuff that's going to happen in the future and we're creating a stress response in the moment, we're not really best equipped to actually take action because we're already stressed. So, for me, it's almost like what came to mind just there is I would almost like to, to get a practice of climate change. And then just breathe out, to start triggering that relaxation bit there. And I just want to say welcome to Sandra as well, because I noticed that Sandra came in late there. So
yes, sorry everyone about being late. No excuse there.
Good to see you, Sandra. Thanks for sending that over, Jimmy. I'm going to look into that practice as well. What you were talking about there, Tabby, is quite closely linked to, there's a Buddhist practice called Tong Len. You're just working with the breath, and what you do is you imagine you're kind of breathing in suffering, they call it, or difficulty, or whatever it is, and then you transform it. So if you are, say it's climate change and you notice anger building up, or it's stress of business, or that worry or whatever, it's kind of breathing that in. And what they say is almost imagine that you're breathing in like a black smoke, and and then kind of sit with it and notice it change into like a light color or a gold or something like that. So you're transforming the energy, and then it's breathing it back out. And these are just, what I believe are just little kind of different things to work with the mind, and to soften everything around it, so that another thing you said there is you switch off for a moment, you stop, and then your mind jumps in. Oh, well done, you've done a good job. What often happens with me is when I'm sitting there and I can't settle down, my mind starts criticizing it quite a bit. I'm like, you're meant to be a mindfulness teacher, you can't even sit silent for a few minutes, you're not even doing this right, you're meant to be this, you're meant to be this. There's a lot of judging and stuff that kicks in as well. So these little focuses are just ways of just bringing that kind of that bit of kindness to what we're noticing in the mind as well. And we're starting to train to turn towards things with a wee bit of kindness and compassion. And that is really the crux of where mindfulness goes as well. The ability to regulate our breathing, focus where to put our mind, and then the more and more we go with it, it's also what comes up in our awareness and what we notice through this practice, trying to turn towards it with a bit of kindness and compassion. That's the kind of evolution of where it all goes, which of course links in very nicely with all the stuff we're talking about here. Any other comments or questions before we move on? So we've kind of touched on a bit of what mindfulness is, but let's just look at it in a wee bit more detail. So we've got Jon Kabat-Zinn here. Jon Kabat-Zinn, I suppose, he's like the godfather of mindfulness in the West. He brought mindfulness over to the West, really one of the kind of main people to bring mindfulness over to the West back in the 70s. He was a professor of health sciences, went over to study with monks and stuff in the Far East, get into this mindfulness practice and thought, gosh, the West needs this. So brought it back over to where he was from, Massachusetts. He obviously had the link with the university, and they did a lot of research there. At that point, went to some of the local hospitals and started working with some of the cancer patients, oncology, cardiology patients, and performed a lot of research on using his mindfulness-based stress reduction program, which is still something that's widely used now. And there was great results from that. Obviously, it wasn't curing all, but there was a good result in using that program. And he started to really start bringing this ancient Eastern practice over to the West and linking it with science as well. Jon Kabat-Zinn still going strong and flying the flag of mindfulness these days. Any connections with Alan Watts and Jon Kabat-Zinn? I don't know. I don't think so. Alan Watts very much talks about mindfulness, as does Eckhart Tolle, and a lot of these people, although they're not, speaking about mindfulness directly, a lot of what they're saying comes in line with the theory of mindfulness and the attitudes and philosophy that comes with mindfulness as well. So, which we'll talk about in a moment. If we look at Jon Kabat-Zinn's definition of what mindfulness is, and I'll break this down in a moment, but the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So what does that mean? Well, mindfulness is not just a relaxation technique. A lot of people think, oh, mindfulness, it's a relaxation technique. It's something to use to de-stress or to fall asleep. And it's like, no, these are often byproducts or results that we get from practicing mindfulness. Not all the time, okay? Sometimes there is that odd occasion where you might find, almost anxiety or stress being heightened a wee bit. So you do have to watch if you're in a real kind of heightened state. If you're not being guided properly, then that could happen, but that's a very small minority. Most of the time, you do find, especially if the correct techniques are being used, that it will help de-stress it'll help you relax, get to sleep, all that, but these are more results that we get from it. Mindfulness is a particular way in which we train the mind. And then with that, with practicing these exercises and training our mind and focusing our mind in a particular way, there's awareness that emerges through paying attention and purpose. So we're not just kicking back and falling asleep. We're just trying to notice here what was going on in my experience as I practice these mindfulness exercises, going from a mindful walk, practicing these breathing exercises. What did I notice? Often we notice the body started to relax, or I felt this in the body, I felt that. I noticed my mind kept on going back to this thought or planning, whatever it was. We're just there to notice and pay attention. So it's quite a purposeful technique for training the mind. It's also helping training our focus. You may have noticed in that practice, I'm saying the mind may wander off, get caught up in judging, analysing, all of that. And that's fine. We just gently bring it back to the breath, to count the breath as it comes in, count the breath as it leaves, or saying our phrase. So we give our mind something, one thing to focus on, or two things to focus on that are purposeful and present. So it can help that storytelling and mind wandering that we do. Because again, the mind's constantly being distracted, and we live in an attention economy. Everyone's trying to pull our attention away from us and distract us. So it's quite hard to be present. I think there was a Harvard study that showed that up to 40% of our time, 47% of our time is either spent thinking about the future or going over the past. So we have to almost train ourselves to be present. Someone's just sent a question there. So is mindfulness just another way of saying meditation? Because meditation is seen as not part of our culture. Can I be mindful without meditating? So mindfulness is a state where we can become, more conscious and more aware. We can practice mindfulness meditation. So, it's just another form of meditation that we can use to become more mindful. And the difference between mindfulness meditation and other forms of meditation is that the crux of what we're working with in mindfulness is focusing on the present. Most meditations will use some kind of form of that, but mindfulness is about training the mind to be present and where to focus our awareness. So again, that takes me nicely onto the next part. So the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment. And we don't just have to do that through meditation. We can use more informal activities as well, which I'll talk about in the next slide, to help us just be more present. So it's paying attention, it's being present with what's around us, being present with how we feel, noticing how we're responding and reacting to things. And then when we can start to do that, we can really start to choose our response rather than just being in this constant reactive to the external world or reactive to how we are feeling about things, but we're not even noticing it. It just helps us stop, be more aware, pay attention, and notice. When we notice how we are feeling, when we notice how we're reacting, it gives us choice. And the final part of his explanation is this non-judgmentally part. So there are the practical techniques within mindfulness, breathing techniques, mindful walking, mindful eating, other forms of kind of mindfulness meditations as well. These are all practical techniques we can use to train our mind in this particular way. But then there's also attitudes and theory that comes with mindfulness. You've got the 7 fundamental attitudes, which are beginner's mind, non-judgment, patience, acceptance, non-striving, trust, letting go. That's the 7 kind of attitudinal pillars that hold up the philosophy of mindfulness, I suppose. And with that, also we bring in other things like curiosity, openness, humor, gratitude, kindness. These all also kind of underpin what mindfulness is, which again comes hand in hand with a lot of the stuff that you're talking about here with this journey to net zero. If we all actually adopted these attitudes, if we've got all the world leaders to adopt a bit of, you know, patience, acceptance, non-striving, curiosity, gratitude, kindness. Kindness might be going a bit too far for some of them, I appreciate, but you know, if we all really embodied that, it would really make us look at how we're treating ourselves, how we're treating others, how we treat the environment, and everything. So, any comments or questions there? Is that all making sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm making copious notes, Craig.
Good, good. I know you like notes. Is mindfulness true learning from our experiences? We are destined to repeat our mistakes until we learn from them. So, good question. Really good point there. So, what mindfulness does, it helps us become more aware. So, it helps us notice things. So, of course, with that, what tends to happen is we notice the thoughts that are ruminating in our mind, the thoughts that we're going over, yeah, and it helps us notice some of the patterns and habits that we have as well. Now that can be a wee bit frustrating at first because, you know, we have to notice it first. So we start to become more aware and we start to notice, we see ourselves, you know, performing these behaviors over and over again. We see ourselves kind of going down that same path. But again, without becoming aware and noticing it, we can't stop it or we can't change it, can we? So it heightens this awareness of everything. So we do start to see the patterns that we're following consistently, but then that gives us choice. Okay, I noticed that every time my dog whines at me like he's doing just now because he's hungry, I get this heightened response. You know, my shoulders tense up. I want to send him out the room, which is a bit of a reaction. But if I notice that, then I can just go, okay, take a breath out, choose what the right response is. So it just gives us little moments and little gaps to slow things down, pause, and choose a response. So it has, especially in conjunction with things like CBT and some other psychotherapy and things like that, can really help us overcome kind of patterns and habits. Any other comments, questions? No.
I've just realized that I've managed to forget everything I learned about mindfulness to date, and now I'm relearning it again. Is that something common, or?
So
Yeah.
yes. So what's been highlighted that maybe today that you?
Oh, I just realized how distracted I was. Even now, I'm trying to focus, and I keep getting message there, just or thoughts, and I realize how I need to retrain my mind to be present.
Yeah. Well, again, so it's that awareness, isn't it? And again, it's remembering that it's so difficult to be present just now, because if we have left our email on, if we've left our phone on, and we're trying to put our attention and our focus somewhere, these things are going to be kind of coming at us. And it's just, you know, the more we can be present and the more we can notice all this pinging up, well, one, maybe we would shut it all down beforehand. But again, it's noticing, do we just want to react to that? So if an email pings in, do you just want to switch off here and then go to the email? As soon as the phone pings, do we react to it and pick it up? You know, and it's noticing that coming in and just pausing for a moment. And again, and choosing, okay, I don't need to look at that email just now. I don't need to look at this. And that is all mindfulness is giving us. And we're not going to get perfect all the time, but it's just helping us notice that stuff. The more we practice these techniques, the more we will be in that state as our kind of general state. Tabby, how are you getting on there? Any words of wisdom from your end?
I'm just listening again in fascination, Craig, because I think Sandra's point there of, oh, I'm just relearning everything that I need to know about mindfulness. I don't think that there's ever an end journey. I'm listening to you, Craig, and going, I can see again how helpful this is for so many busy business leaders who are like, oh my God, I can feel the pressure. I've got to get to net zero. There's all these government targets. I don't know where to start. I'm overwhelmed with the noise. I mean, even bringing it back to that climate narrative story, something that really hit home for me, that I think has been really impactful, Juliet, if you don't mind me sharing this, was when Juliet said to me, I'm at university and I'm learning about climate change, and all I'm hearing from my professors and my tutors is that it's too late, that we don't have an opportunity, that we don't have a chance. And even that as a piece of mindfulness, for me, it reinforces why we need this, because if we're not aware of the stories that we're also reacting and responding to, then we're actually putting on that stress, to other people. And I remember reading something that Newsround did a study, and they said that children as young as 5 were having nightmares about climate anxiety. And it's like, if our students are feeling overwhelmed and despaired, our children are having nightmares, what then could a bit of mindfulness do? Because it gives us that little bit of gap to go, oh, can I be more aware of what I'm communicating to other people, how I'm showing up, but also bringing it back to business, not just, the family, the community context there. It's bringing it back to business. It's like, if you don't take that breath before you make the next decision, how do you know that you're making a decision that's best to take you to, closer towards net zero or further away? And, it just comes back to, if everybody took a breath before they took any form of action, how quickly could we actually accelerate progress towards net zero, because we've had time to stop, reflect, and think about the actions that we're going to take.
Yeah, nice. And it's simplifying it all as well, isn't it? I mean, if you look how simple the practice of this really is, for how, like you say, it's a never-ending thing. I've been practicing mindfulness now for, gosh, what we at, 18 years, and every time I talk through this, I'm relearning it, and I'm reminding myself, and it's going back to the basics, and it's really simple. Just stop, take a breath before you react. How simple is that? Just pay attention to your breath and your body as you go throughout the day. And I think with the climate change side of things, whether it's as an individual or as a business as well, I think we can get overwhelmed, as you were saying, and feel like we want to take the weight of the world on our shoulders. And it's coming back to that simplicity of just being, what can we do? What direct actions can we do? And I think it's that ground up mentality, isn't it? If we can really get that, again, be more self-conscious, more aware of ourselves and how we act and how we think and how we behave and all of that. And if everyone can do a bit of that, then there's this sense of, everyone doing their bit.
Mm-hmm. And I think it builds upon what we were saying actually before we started the session. It's like, if we honestly think that we can create a sustainable world where the planet's healthy and people are healthy from a place of being under stress and feeling overwhelmed, we're off our heads. And I can't even pretend to put that in a more professional way, and it's that link between what's going on internally for us is happening externally. And I think, it brings it back, if we look at the big picture here. For me, it's no coincidence. There is a correlation, and a strong correlation between the fact that we're in a mental health crisis and our planet's ecosystems are failing. And the two have to be considered together as one, which is the whole point of doing these future series. We're looking at net zero and we're recognizing the operations, the action that you need to be taken. And we're bringing in this message of, let's slow down and make sure that we're taking the right action so that healthy people create healthy businesses that create a healthy planet. And, it's no rocket science when you look at it in simple ways. If all you need to do is take a breath, how difficult is it to take a breath and be conscious before you move on to the next step?
Yeah, and there's always that wee bit of space in amongst all the busyness and amongst all the distraction. And I think the good thing of, again, coming back to this as a practice, it trains our mind to notice when it's being pulled away and distracted here, there, and everywhere, and it helps us recognize it and zoom our focus back in when it's needed. And that's all we're training to do. We actually have a lot more control than what we actually think we do, because when we're constantly being distracted, we're being pulled here, there, and everywhere, and pings going off, and all these different things to think about. That's when we're in reactive mode. But if we have stayed true to a consistent practice, whether that's going for your nature walk and that's your mindfulness practice, whether it's a bit of breathing, whether it's a bit of yoga, whatever it is for you that pulls you into that state of being present and being aware and focused, then that's our thing, because that filters into the rest of our day. If we make that consistent practice as well, it's a cumulative. Neuroscience research shows that this is an accumulative practice, and it pulls us out of this state of being distracted, this state of being constantly worried and anxious. The different parts of our brain become more dominant and become our default state.
Nina and Juliet, I see you've got your hand raised there.
You basically just answered my question, but I was just going to ask you if you could give any advice to people who think that mindfulness and meditation isn't for them because they've tried it in the past and they said, like, I've heard this quite a few times because I've started practicing mindfulness in my life and it's really helped me. So I've been telling other people to attempt mindfulness. And one of the responses that I get often is, oh, this isn't for me. Every time I try and sit down, I get distracted within 30 seconds. So if there's any concrete advice you could provide those people with.
Yeah, so I heard a great quote from a practitioner called George Mumford. He's a brilliant mindfulness practitioner. He's worked with Jon Kabat-Zinn before. He was a former drug addict in rehab and stuff like that, and came across mindfulness to overcome his trauma. As it turns out, he then became like the mindfulness coach for the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan and big businesses and stuff like that all over the world. But he's worked a lot with trauma. He really understands trauma or stress as well. And he says sometimes you got to move yourself into stillness, which I think is just brilliant, because I find that myself quite a lot. I actually noticed it more when we hit the COVID lockdown, because I used to travel out to businesses. I used to be traveling about all over the place, out seeing people. I was very active with my work, and then it was everything was put into this room on computer, and then I was in here working all day online, which was great. I had the ability to do that, but then I would try and do my practice. This is also somewhere where I would try and do my seated practice. I would sit down and I'd just be so active and almost have this energy in my body, and I found that I need to go for a walk first, or I need to do some movement or some stretching, and then when I sat down, it was easier to settle and be more still. So what I would say to some people that really struggle with that settling down and being still, sometimes just doing a little bit, going for a walk or doing a little bit of movement, a little bit of stretching, and then try and sit down. Do something active that helps you be more present though, and wind the body down a little bit and then try and be more present. Or again, the little technique I'm about to just take you through in a moment as well, use something like that. That this more sensory practice, meditation and mindfulness can be active. You don't have to sit still and just and be still and silent all the time. It was especially for people who have had heightened bouts of stress, which has been quite recent, or they've experienced a lot of trauma in their life as well. Just the stillness can almost feel like torture at times. It can be difficult and painful. So it doesn't need to be that. Doing more active practices can give us the benefit without going through the pain. So, a nice little practice that I like to use in nature is this hear, see, feel practice. So again, what we're talking about here, it's not like this is some special technique where you need candles on, you need the right sound, you need the right lighting, all of that. You need to sit still. It's like, no, what's mindfulness? It's being conscious and aware. That's all it is, right? So there's lots of different things that can take us there. Try just eating a snack or eating your lunch with no distraction. You're just fully tasting the food here, you know, fully experiencing the food. That's a mindfulness practice. Try just, you know, doing some stretching or a little bit of yoga or something with nothing else on. You're just moving and stretching the body and paying attention to how you feel. That's a mindfulness practice. It makes you more conscious and aware. This little practice is something I like to use, especially, Juliet, for what you said, for maybe when you struggle to sit down and practice, and it's going for a little walk. And again, you can do this out in the streets. Ideally, you would go into, you know, somewhere that's a bit more kind of, even going to a local park or something, just getting near the trees or in the woods or by the sea, just wherever you can. It just really helps you embrace nature a bit more, because just being in nature alone will take us into a kind of similar brainwave and mind state as meditation will. Now, when we can link both together, it helps us get there into a kind of deeper state. So either switch the mobile phone off or put that aside for a wee while. Yeah, we need to disconnect from these phones a little bit. So we would do that. And then I generally say, you know, just kind of walk to the place or go to the place that you're going to. I like to say, kind of set a wee bit of an intention of that. I'm going here to practice a mindfulness. I'm going here to be present on my walk, whatever your intention is here. So it's getting very, very clear on that. Then when we get to that place, what we can do is settle our mind down a wee bit by just taking 5 to 10 conscious breaths. Or you can do more. Again, sometimes when I do this walk, I'll go on a longer walk and I'll maybe just do this breathing, you know, this conscious breathing until I feel I've settled myself down. But we want to do this quite sharp, just 5 to 10 conscious breaths like we did at the start. Just even breath in, even breath out. Just really consciously paying attention to our breaths. And then we go into stage 1, which is here. So it's listening to the sounds around us, not looking for sounds, not reacting to sounds. And a little technique that was given to me is just imagine the middle part of the ear where the sound travels into. Imagine that's just opening up. So it's like a little drawbridge between your sense of sound and the environment around. So you're just allowing the sounds to travel to you, and you're noticing them come and go. You know, and again, that might be sounds of traffic, then the wind, then a bird, or whatever it is. So we're really just allowing the sounds to travel to us. And you can do that for a minute, for 10 minutes, whatever feels right for you. And then step 4 is see. And so at that point, we start to look around and what can we see? And not getting to the point where we're over-analysing things. So generally using things like shapes and light and colours and really paying attention to that. That makes us more right brain focused. Whereas if we start paying attention to things like number plates and cars, analysing people's faces, that's all very analytical and left brain. So again, more going into shapes, light, colours, noticing these kind of things. And sometimes it can help as well just to say these things. I see a leaf, I see brown, I see green, I see purple, just saying these things in our mind. So that again just helps keep our mind focused on what we're paying attention to. And then step 5 again, for a few minutes, whatever feels right for you, is paying attention to the body sensations. So this is one that's really easy when you're outside. You feel the air on the skin, you feel the wind, you feel, you know, the feet crunching through the leaves, you feel the terrain changing as you're walking. Do that for a few moments. So these are all things that anchor us into being present, being aware of the senses, pulling us out of the mind into our senses. And then at that point, just walk, you know, so walking with no purpose. You're not trying to meditate, you're not trying to, it's okay if your mind thinks, you're just walking and you're noticing as you walk. Jimmy, so I'm unable to walk for any real distance, therefore I focus on swimming. Brilliant, great. I try and swim 1500 meters each morning. Brilliant, brilliant. And yeah, Jimmy, quite a good thing. You maybe use a technique like this is at the start when you're swimming, you can almost count your strokes or count your breaths or whatever, you know, having a little kind of mantra like that, a little repetition thing going off in the mind, so it's counting 1 stroke, 2 stroke, or whatever it is, counting your breath, something that you can just use to help you just stay focused there. But an activity like that is very, very good because you are so sensory aware. So walking, swimming, cycling, again, all things that we can do and be present with. And these little techniques can just kind of help us when we're out in nature to embrace it all a bit more as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Craig.
Feel free to email me any questions you have. I've got a little ebook that's free to download on the website. It has some exercise and nutrition stuff, but it has some stuff about stress management and mindfulness in there as well. Great.